Have you ever been in a situation where you knew that you weren't supposed to do something, but you do it anyway, even though you actively know, you're actively thinking, I shouldn't be doing this. This is not helpful for me. This is gonna ultimately make my life harder, even if it feels easier in the moment. When I was a kid, probably like from the ages of like 10 to 15 maybe, I would steal snacks from my parents. And at first, like, they would just have stuff in their room, you know, stuff that like they wanted to have that obviously, like, if they shared it with me or my brother, it would just be gone. So they would put stuff up in their room, and whenever they were gone on like a walk or at work or something like that, I would go in their room and I would take stuff. And of course I was like 10 when this started, so I wasn't good at it, and they noticed pretty quickly. So they would start like hiding stuff better. And over like years and years, I just continued to do it, and I kept getting in trouble for it. Like, they kept noticing. I wasn't even really trying to hide it. Like, if I wanted to take something and have them not notice, most of the time I probably could, but just like the craving that I had for like sugar or whatever, just a snack, I would just let that overpower me, and I would just let myself get in trouble, even though I knew it was going to make my life harder. In the moment, I just wanted some candy or whatever, and like that overwhelming urge was so strong that to me it felt easier to deal with the consequences in the future than to suppress that urge. And over time, like, I have this one memory of going into the garage, and at this point I might have been taking alcohol, because eventually this started happening with alcohol as well. And I remember walking out the garage and thinking, like, this is bad. I shouldn't be doing this. Like, this is gonna make my life harder. Like, it's not even really worth it. And yet I still did it anyway. You know, I had the option right there to stop and turn around and go put it back in the fridge or whatever, and I didn't. And I'm sure that you've probably experienced something along these lines at some point. You know, another example would be like my friend. I don't know if you can see this. I'm sitting on a skateboard here. Both him and me skate. He gets these mental blocks. You know, like, he's been trying to learn how to kickflip for a long time, and he has really good form. He has very good flick. His back foot stays over the board the whole time, levels out his board in the air good. The only issue that he has is that his front foot will land either in front of the board or under the board. And he's been trying to fix this for so long, and I've tried to give him like as many tips as I can. But when it comes down to it, he has done this for so long that his brain just defaults to this. And he wants to do it, you know. Like, the other day he was trying to learn a trick, and I mean, he has the trick 95% of the way. The only thing, in fact, he has it 100%. The only part that he would struggle with is committing. Basically, he's doing this trick. It's called a rock to fakie. It's not important that you know what this is, but basically, like, you go up on a ramp, you go over the coping, and then you come down going backwards. And he can do the entire trick, but every time he would get scared of coming down backwards. Even though he can ride up a ramp and then ride back down, but he can't get his front trucks over the coping and then come down. But he can, it's just that it scares him so much that he steps off every single time, even though his form is like perfect every time, and if he just kept his back foot on, it would be there. By the way, if you see this video, I love you, bro. You got that shit. Like, I promise you could do that with very, very little effort. But the reason for these kind of things is because brains are not really us. You know, we're kind of taught that, like, your brain is you know, and I mean, that makes sense. This is where your consciousness kind of forms, is in your brain. It's where all of your thoughts happen. You know, you can measure them. You can measure what your brain does and your experience of life through your neurons firing and all of this stuff. I'm not an expert on any of this kind of stuff, and I didn't do any research for this video, really. This is mostly just based off of my own life experiences. And I don't exactly know how true or how much scientific backing that this has, but the way that I kind of think about my relationship with my brain is, I don't think of my brain as me. To kind of explain what I mean by that, I first kind of have to talk a little bit about, like, the brain and the way that it works. So I think the best kind of analogy for this is, if you think about like a path in a forest, right? A path starts out not existing. It's just a forest. It's just another section of forest. But when somebody walks through that forest, it changes the forest a little bit. You know, it's very, very small, but they might break some branches. They're going to compress the ground a little bit. They might step on some fauna, or whatever the word is. But ultimately, like, there's not going to be too much of a difference. Maybe if you're like an expert tracker or something like that, you could tell the difference. But it's very, very minimal impact. Now, if somebody else walks down that path, suddenly all those effects are doubled. Still pretty much unnoticeable, but it adds a little bit more. As you get more and more people walking down this path, you know, eventually you get to this point where you have this very clear pathway where the ground is compacted. There's very clearly no plants growing or anything like that. And the stronger that this pathway gets, the more people are going to take it. Brains are just like that with both physical things and with mental things. Your brain it's like a sponge that absorbs information, or like plastic that you can like mold into different things, or clay, anything like that. With my friend, the more times he tries to kickflip and his foot goes below the board, the more that gets baked into his brain. And when he doesn't think about it, if he just shuts his brain off and tries to do a kickflip, that's what's going to happen. The same way that somebody who's practiced a kickflip for a really, really, really long time in the correct way, if they shut their brain off, their brain's just going to do it because they've carved out a very, very strong pathway in their brain. And it works the same way with mental things. Me, for example, stealing candy from my parents, and, you could apply this to a bunch of other things. The more that you do it, the more that just becomes the default for your brain. And if you do it enough, I remember that time, like I was talking about, where I actively knew what I was doing was wrong and was going to hurt me, and I still did it anyway, because that pathway I carved out was so strong that, I'm looking to the side, seeing a bunch of forest, and I don't want to go down this pathway, I want to go somewhere else, but it looks so difficult to carve out a new pathway. It's so much easier to just take the pathway. And so that's what you do. That's kind of why, at least the way I think about it, your brain isn't really you. It doesn't always reflect what you actually believe, what you actually think. If you've ever been in a relationship before, you probably have had arguments that repeat, that you'll periodically have, and they might change a little bit, but for the most part, they'll kind of stay the same. And sometimes you get to a point where you'll be arguing for something and you'll think about it and you realize, I don't even think this. I don't even care about this. This doesn't even matter to me. But we've done this so many times that I don't know what else to do. Same goes like for reactions. That will happen all the time where, something will happen and I'll just react instinctively, and I realize like I don't want to be reacting like this. This isn't helping me. And not just in relationships, but in everything in life. The more times that you walk down that path, just the stronger it gets and the harder that it gets to go somewhere else. And the reason why I think it's important to understand this is because it's so easy to just continue like that and to just not think about it. Because the way that it works in physics in the real world, say you have a box on the ground and you want to push that box across the room, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get that box started moving than it's going to be to keep it moving. And that's just the way that friction works. It takes more energy to overcome friction than it does to just continue moving the box. And all things work this way. I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's just the fundamental rule of the universe. And, with this kind of stuff, that's what it is. When you start making that path, it's going to be really difficult because you got to get through all of this foliage, You might have to cut off branches, you might have to go around trees, there might be uneven ground and stuff like that. But the more people that go over it, the more times you take that path, the easier it's going to get because that work's already been done. And it's so important to remember that, because these pathways that you've created yourself, they might feel like they're the only option, but they're not the only option. They're just the easier option. They're an easier option you created for yourself. And unfortunately, it is going to be difficult, and it is going to be more difficult than just starting off on your own, but only really mentally, anytime you start to make a path, it's going to be just as difficult. Depending on the forest you're in and the area you're in, maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult just because of the natural landscape, which that being an analogy for, obviously it's going to be harder to change a habit you've been doing for 10 years than it's going to be to change one small habit on like a skateboard trick or something like that. But no matter what, it's going to be difficult, but it's going to feel even more difficult because you have this already paved path that you could just take, but it won't lead you to where you want to go. And that's kind of the thing about life, is you can go anywhere you want to go. You can do anything that you want to do. It's just that you have to work for it. You have to be willing to work for it. And not just willing to work for it, but you have to actually do it, and you have to be like good at it. If you make a really shitty path, you don't bother cleaning the foliage and you got to brush past all these branches every time, you're going to get scraped up, and it's not going to be a very good path. No one's going to want to take it. But if you put a lot of effort into that, it's going to be a way easier path to take in the future. And of course, this is all just analogies for life, And it makes you feel a little bit better, It makes it feel a little bit easier, a little bit more accessible to remember, I just have to fight my brain a little bit. It's not going to be easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but you got to fight your brain. And there's lots of little mental tricks and things that you can do to kind of make it easier. But when it comes down to it, you have to make that pathway. You have to do the grunt work. You got to take the machete, you got to cut down the branches, you got to walk the pathway a million times, and eventually you'll make that new pathway. And then that's going to be the default. That's going to be the easy one. But now by this point, I'm kind of just repeating myself. So let me know if any of this helped you in any way, and let me know if you have anything to add to this. This is a topic that I could talk about for forever probably. So leave your story or your insight in the comments, and it might help somebody. It might help me. I have a long ways to go. It probably will help me. I have a lot to learn, and everybody has a lot to learn. Even when you're 60, 70 years old, there's still things to learn. So anyway, thank you for watching this. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in another video.